The sky was cracked, a permanent scar deep in the horizon. It wasn't just a wound in the sky, but the indelible mark of a cataclysm that nearly wiped out humanity. Zarek Castillon flew alone, his plane cutting through the air like a lost shadow among the fragmented clouds. He was a smuggler, a pilot who used his skills to slip between the floating cities, delivering forgotten celestial relics. His job was simple, until, on a routine mission, he met Erin Luthiel. She wasn't like the others Zarek had known. Her presence was overwhelming, like the sky itself felt thicker around her. Her eyes glowed with an intensity Zarek couldn't quite grasp, but soon he realized she wasn't just running from the empty circle. She was running from a past that Zarek, unknowingly, still carried. The shock was immediate. Erin wasn't like the other fugitives Zarek had helped escape. She knew things about the celestial fragments, things he'd never imagined. She spoke of the fallen sky pieces, how these fragments had the power to alter reality. Zarek, who'd always believed his only connection to the skies was through his risky flights, was stunned to realize his past was tied to the fall of the sky. There was something inside him that linked him to all of this. But what exactly he still didn't know. Erin revealed something even more disturbing. A prophecy, an ancient prediction about a chosen one meant to restore the balance of the world. But the chosen one, according to the legend, would have to make an unimaginable sacrifice to bring about the ascension of the lost sky. What she didn't say was that the chosen one was closer than Zarek ever thought. He wasn't just carrying relics of a forgotten past, he was an essential part of it. As she spoke, Zarek began to realize that his skills as a pilot weren't mere coincidence. He had been prepared, unconsciously, for something much bigger than just smuggling. The conversation with Erin revealed more than he wanted to know. The empty circle wasn't just a group of mercenaries hunting for relics. They were the guardians of an ancient secret, a secret capable of reshaping the world. Zarek found himself in a dilemma. What would he do with this truth? How could he handle the weight of a past so deep and unsettling? He knew his next step wouldn't be simple, and as he looked at Erin, he realized that somehow he was about to get involved in something much bigger than his own actions. But before he could make a decision, something moved in the shadows. A scream cut through the air, distant but urgent. The empty circle was closer than they thought. Zarek felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. His smuggling mission was about to turn into a fight for survival. And with it, the sacrifice mentioned in the prophecy began to feel more real. He looked at the cracked sky, a reminder that destiny wasn't something he could avoid. What was coming would demand more than he could ever imagine. Their journey was just beginning. Erin looked at Zarek, her eyes filled with sadness and determination. She knew that the ascension of the lost sky depended on decisions he wasn't ready to make. But she also knew he wouldn't have a choice. He was the key to either restoring balance or letting the world fall to ruins once again. Zarek was about to discover that he could no longer run from destiny. The fragment of his true mission was in his hands, and he could no longer ignore it. The sacrifice was looming, and the choices he made in the next few hours could change everything. As the winds began to shift and darkness closed in, Zarek knew he couldn't turn back. He took a deep breath, aware that the future was in his hands. The sky, the fragment of his destiny, the sacrifice he had to make, all of it was about to intertwine. The adventure he'd started as a smuggler was now leading him down a path with no return. But there was still so much to be revealed. The empty circle was lurking, and the journey to stop the rise of darkness was just beginning. The shattered sky waited, and the key to restoring it was in Zarek and Erin. They couldn't afford to fail. The wind sliced through the destroyed sky with uncontrollable fury, a storm in constant mutation that mirrored the chaos below them. Zarek and Erin were aboard an improvised aircraft, a complex build made of wreckage and parts salvaged from ancient floating cities. The craft hummed through the vastness like a giant insect, cutting through the dark clouds, its engines emitting a tense, metallic melody. Each gust of wind seemed to carry the echoes of a lost age, and Zarek felt, more than ever, that the weight of a dark destiny was closing in on him, as if the sky was crumbling around him. He looked at Erin, who was focused on the helm, her eyes locked on the distant horizon. She seemed unshaken, like a rock in the storm, but Zarek knew she was hiding something. Her movements were swift and precise, but her posture didn't fool him. He noticed, with growing unease, the dark gleam reflected in her eyes, a shadow that seemed to have deep roots in Erin's past. She never spoke of her origins, of what had brought her to this point, but Zarek knew she carried invisible scars, marks that couldn't be healed with just a sword or comforting words. As the hours of flying, when the silence took over, he found himself wondering how many secrets she was still hiding. They'd escaped the clutches of the empty circle, but it had come at a steep price. Every passing day seemed to dig the doubt deeper into Zarek's heart. What was keeping them together? What was pushing them forward on this journey full of uncertainty? As the group moved through the distant skies and devastated lands, Zarek couldn't help but wonder if they were just running in circles, like birds fleeing a storm with no idea where they were headed. When the group finally reached the floating ruins territory, Zarek saw, for the first time, the imposing King Kaler. He was standing in front of an entrance to an abandoned city, his eyes vacant and hollow. What Zarek saw in that gaze wasn't just sadness, but an ancient pain, as if Kaler was carrying an unbearable weight. The scars he bore weren't just physical, they were spiritual. It seemed like he had lost something far beyond the reach of his kingdom. Beside him was Sienna, a woman with quick movements and skilled hands, rebuilding an aircraft with pieces of iron and metal scattered around her. She seemed to be the most practical one in the group, always sporting an ironic smile, like she was trying to prove that the impossible was just a matter of perspective. But as Zarek watched, he couldn't ignore that Sienna's strength came from a deep need to redeem something. What exactly was she trying to redeem? Zarek felt like there was more to her than she was willing to show. The others in the group seemed to be focused on their own paths, fixated on their own pasts and ghosts, but Aaron's gaze never seemed to stray too far from Sienna. There was a silent connection between them, something Zarek still couldn't fully understand. The group was always on the move, crossing devastated lands where the sky seemed to fall apart more and more with every step they took. With every floating city they passed, the ancient ruins and forgotten buildings made the world around them feel like it was disintegrating, one fragment at a time. There was no going back. In every place they visited, Zarek could feel the weight of an unrelenting destiny pressing down on his shoulders. Aaron's words, spoken softly, still echoed in his mind. The empty circle doesn't just want the fragments, Zarek. They want to control the sky, shape it to their own vision. During one of their stops at an old repair station, while the group worked to get their aircraft flying again, Zarek had a deep conversation with Aaron. It was one of those talks no one else witnessed, a moment of isolation in the midst of a crumbling world. She told him about the celestial fragments, scattered pieces of immense power, fragments that, when united, could either heal or destroy the world. Aaron spoke of an ancient prophecy that said the chosen one, the one marked by the ascension, would gather the fragments to restore the sky. But what she didn't say was that those seeking the power of the fragments would do anything to possess them. The empty circle was after them. And the empty circle was relentless. Zarek didn't fully understand what she was saying, but he felt an increasing connection to the idea of ascension. He didn't know what that meant for him, but deep down he felt that he was somehow involved in it. Why? Because the visions he was starting to have were getting stronger and more intense. They came when he least expected it, like flashes of an unknown power. He saw the sky, but not the sky he knew. It was something different, broken and fragmented. He saw stars falling and scattering like dust, and in his chest, he felt the weight of these images as if the universe itself was trying to communicate with him. Meanwhile, the group kept getting attacked by sky pirates, outlaws who raided the skies, pillaging floating cities and leaving only destruction in their wake. Each battle with the pirates was harder than the last, and Zarek could feel time running out. They were being followed. Something bigger was at stake, and Zarek knew they couldn't keep running forever. But there was a greater force guiding them. Or at least that's what he felt. He could see the same determination and fear in his friends, the same search for something greater. The empty circle wanted the fragments, and they wouldn't stop until the sky was completely destroyed. At night, when the group camped in a barren land, Zarek had a vision that terrified him. He was in a vast field, an endless plain where the sky seemed to be collapsing. The sky was disintegrating as if it were made of glass, and amid the chaos, Zarek saw something that froze him in place. A hooded figure, a dark silhouette slowly approaching. It was impossible to see its face, but the weight of the emptiness seemed to drag around it. It was the empty circle, he knew that. But why was he seeing this? Why, of all people, was he being marked by these visions? And what did they mean? The group continued their journey, with Zarek becoming more obsessed with the visions. The weight of what was to come felt like a storm about to explode. He no longer knew if he was chasing a clear goal or if he was being guided by an invisible force. But he knew he couldn't turn back. He was connected to something bigger, something he didn't fully understand but couldn't ignore. When the group finally reached an abandoned city, a forgotten ruin hidden among the floating mountains, Zarek knew something was about to go down. A feeling of inevitability hung in the air. Something was on the verge of being revealed. But he had no idea what or if he was ready for it. Aaron's words, once vague, now rang clearer in his mind. "You're the key, Zarek. You're marked for the ascension. But for what? We don't know yet." Doubt, anguish, and the weight of the future hung over Zarek. With every step, he felt like the sky was falling around him. The broken wings, once a symbol of loss, were now turning into something bigger. A symbol that what was lost could somehow be rebuilt. But at what cost? What would happen to his fate when the truth at last was revealed? What was he willing to sacrifice to stop the apocalypse, the one he felt creeping closer with every moment, from actually becoming a reality? The journey to the City of Mist was harder than Zarek could have imagined. Every step brought him closer to a hidden secret, something he was just starting to understand. The city, wrapped in thick, dense fog, seemed endless, its crumbling streets and buildings falling apart under the weight of time. To Zarek, the sight of the city felt like a nightmare come to life. A place where reality and dreams intertwined. The ruins, covered in a thick layer of moss and wild plants, were shrouded in a silver mist that never lifted, a haze that seemed to swallow any light that tried to break through. The city was silent, a silence Zarek could feel deep in his bones, as if the very winds had been consumed by the fog. The sense that something was wrong was palpable, as if the echoes of a forgotten tragedy still rang through the broken walls. He knew there was something off about this place, but he couldn't quite figure out what. The group moved slowly, their steps heavy and cautious. Even the more experienced members, like Kaler and Aaron, seemed uneasy in this environment. It was like the city itself was in the process of fading away, its existence becoming more uncertain with every step, as if it were dissolving into the mist of the past. As they moved through the empty streets, Zarek felt the pressure building on his shoulders. He knew they were close to the heart of the City of Mist, where the fragments they were searching for might be hidden, but the uncertainty about what awaited them grew with every step. Kaler, always the leader, seemed lost in his own thoughts. The weight of responsibility was clear on his face, like he was carrying the secrets of a past that wasn't ready to be uncovered. Sienna, on the other hand, kept her focus on the present. She was practical, always watching for details, like she was trying to catch any movement in the shadows of the mist, but Zarek knew that deep down she was also fighting her own demons. Then something changed. The silence was broken by a distant sound, one Zarek first thought was just an illusion. But as they got closer to a central square, the sound became clearer, more distinct. It was music. A sweet, ethereal melody that seemed to come from deep within, as if the very heart of the city was singing to them. Zarek felt a chill run down his spine. Something was happening here, something he couldn't quite understand. The music was calling them like an invitation. But who was calling them? Erin was the first to move toward the sound, her steps light and quiet. Zarek tried to follow his comrade, but something stopped him. The fog seemed to thicken around him like it was trying to trap him. He pushed forward, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the city was turning into an invisible prison, a place where secrets were piling up and becoming more unbearable by the second. Kaler and Sienna were behind him, but the sense that they were being watched was undeniable. The fog no longer seemed like just a natural phenomenon. It had become a conscious presence, something that knew their fears and secrets. As they approached an ancient temple, Zarek felt a tug in his chest, a sensation that made him stop. Inside the building, a soft light leaked from the cracks in the walls, as if something inside was trying to manifest. The music had stopped, but now something else filled the air, a deep silence heavy with ancient energy. Zarek knew this was the key to the revelation, but something inside him kept him from moving forward. He didn't know what exactly, but the fear seemed to spread through him like an electric current. Erin, noticing his hesitation, looked at him with a gaze that mixed understanding and urgency. "Zarek," she said softly, almost like a prayer. "This is it. What are you waiting for?" He didn't know how to answer. He was scared, yes, but he also felt an irresistible pull toward the promise of answers, of a deeper understanding of what was happening to him in the world. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. He looked at the others, each with their own doubts and hopes, and made the only choice he could. He stepped into the temple. They were looking for a fragment of celestial power. But as Zarek stared at the artifact, something caught his eye that made him tense up. The object wasn't alone. Around it, the shadows seemed to shift, like something was trying to break free from its confinement. The air grew heavy, and a sense of imminent danger washed over Zarek. He could feel the city starting to move, its foundations trembling as if it was preparing to reveal what was hidden deep beneath. Erin was the first to step toward the pedestal, but before she could touch the fragment, a scream echoed through the ruins. It wasn't human. It was a distorted voice, one that seemed to rise from the very fabric of the mist. Zarek took a step back, his heart racing. Something was wrong. Something old and powerful was waking up, and escaping its grasp wasn't going to be easy. In an instant, the mist around them stirred violently, and a figure appeared in the center of the temple. It was an entity cloaked in dark robes, its eyes hidden beneath the hood. Its presence was overwhelming, like it was beyond human comprehension. It turned toward Zarek and Erin, its eyes glowing with a cold light. "You think you can control what's beyond your understanding?" The being's voice echoed, making the stones around them vibrate. "Your fate wasn't chosen by you but by something greater." The tension in the air was palpable, and Zarek knew that whatever was standing before them wasn't just a shadow of the city. It was something much older, a force that existed even before the city was built. The revelation was about to unfold, and Zarek, more than ever, felt like his life and destiny were about to be irrevocably changed. The Guardian appeared with such an imposing presence that it seemed to swallow all the light around it. Its cloak, made of shadows, seemed to have a life of its own, writhing and flowing as if it were an extension of the dense air of the city. The mist, which had previously been a strange and oppressive backdrop, now seemed to reshape itself around it, as if acknowledging its authority and power. Zarek felt the coldness on his back intensify, a shiver running down his spine. He knew deep inside that he was facing something he couldn't fully comprehend but would have to confront. The hooded figure didn't make any immediate movements. Its presence alone was enough to freeze anyone who dared to approach. Zarek felt the weight of its gaze on him, even though he couldn't see the face beneath the hood. However, the voice, deep and resonant, left no doubt that the entity before them wasn't just a simple guardian. It was something much older, perhaps a manifestation of fate itself, or a shadow that had formed over the ages to protect what should not be touched. "You seek what you cannot understand," the Guardian's voice echoed, cutting through the silence and reverberating off the temple's walls. "Every step you take brings you closer to the truth but also to destruction. You don't know what you awaken when you try to control the fate of something that doesn't belong to you." Erin, always so fearless, was the first to react, raising her hand in a cautious gesture. "What's going on here? What are you?" she asked firmly, though there was a slight uncertainty in her voice, a fear she couldn't hide. The Guardian remained silent for a moment, the sound of its heavy breathing blending with the whisper of the mist. Then it raised a hand and the environment around them began to shift. The walls of the temple started glowing with a ghostly light, and the entire city seemed to respond to the Guardian's call. Zarek felt his throat tighten as a sense of imminent danger surrounded him. He knew that the city was becoming more than just a place. It was becoming a living entity, a force that was watching and testing them every moment. "I am the Guardian of the Mist, the protector of what cannot be changed. My purpose is to maintain balance, to prevent those who do not understand its importance from interfering with the natural course of things." Its voice now seemed to come from every corner, echoing in the stones and the wind, as if the city itself were speaking through it. Zarek tried to gather his thoughts. What he had been searching for, the artifact on the pedestal, the keys to destiny, was just a part of what the Guardian was defending. They were invading something sacred, something beyond their understanding. The truth was, their mission wasn't as simple as they thought. They weren't just seeking power, they were meddling with ancient forces that could destroy everything they knew. "If you are the Guardian," Zarek began, trying to stay calm, "why don't you let us understand what we're looking for? What do we need to do to make sure this doesn't end in disaster?" The Guardian looked at him for a long moment, its eyes empty beneath the hood, as if evaluating every word he said. "You seek what you do not understand. The fate was sealed long ago, and now, any attempt to alter it will be an affront to the balance. What you want, mortal children, is the key to what should not be unlocked. The feeling of suffocation in the room grew with every word, as if the fog was closing in even tighter around them. Zarek felt a weight on his shoulders, like the responsibility for all the potential destruction was about to be thrown his way. He could see the doubt in Aaron and Kaler's eyes. They were starting to realize the enormity of the situation too. What they were trying to achieve seemed beyond anything any of us should even attempt. But something inside Zarek kept pushing him forward. He knew there was a bigger reason behind all of this. If the fate is already sealed, Zarek said, his voice heavy with determination, then we need to understand what's at stake. We're here because we believe there's more. Something that can help us save what's left. Whatever it is you're protecting, we need to know. We can't give up without trying. The Guardian, however, seemed to pause. He watched Zarek with an intensity that made his heart race. The mist around him began to swirl slowly, as if the Guardian's presence was the key to controlling all that mystical energy. The shadows danced and stretched, covering the walls in an almost hypnotic way. So, you want to understand? The Guardian spoke again, this time with a hint of something Zarek couldn't identify. You want to know what's really at stake? Brace yourself, because the truth you seek might not be what you expect. Everything has a price, and what's about to be revealed might be more than you're ready to bear. With those words, the Guardian extended his hand, and a wave of energy rippled through the temple. Zarek felt the ground tremble beneath his feet, and the walls began to shift, forming patterns he could never have imagined. Everything around him seemed to collapse, but also reconfigure into something new, something deeper. The ancient relics began to glow, their shapes molding into visions of a lost history. A history that now Zarek felt was about to be revealed. The city around them seemed to fall into a trance, as if time and space had warped. The energy emanating from the Mist Guardian had invaded every corner of the ancient city, transforming the buildings into shifting shadows and the streets into rivers of floating light. Zarek felt the pressure mounting, his body trembling with the weight of the truth that was about to be revealed. He and his allies were at the center of something far greater than they could have imagined. The Guardian watched them in imposing silence, but his eyes, though invisible beneath the hood, seemed to carry an ancient wisdom and at the same time, a sadness Zarek couldn't fully understand. They were standing before the last barrier separating humanity from ancient knowledge, a truth that, if unleashed, could destroy the balance sustaining the world. What the Guardian had said about the price of choices still echoed in Zarek's mind. Everything had a price, and now he was starting to understand that the cost of what they were seeking might be far more than they were prepared to pay. Kaler looked at the Guardian with a tense expression, his eyes fixed on the relics glowing on the walls. You talked about a price, he said, his voice steady but full of apprehension. What does that mean? What will we have to lose? The Guardian took a slight step forward, as if the mist shaped itself around him, responding to his presence. The price is not what you will lose physically, he began, his voice deepening, but what you will lose from the very essence of who you are. The fate of all is intertwined with the power you seek. Those who dare to touch what they should not, will have to face themselves in ways they cannot understand. The greatest sacrifice is not what you leave behind, but what you will become when the truth is revealed. Zarek took a step forward, feeling his breath grow heavier. The Guardian wasn't just talking about losing something tangible, but about a deep transformation, a change in the very core of their being. The revelation they were after could turn them into something completely different. He looked at Aaron and Kaler, and despite all the tension, a surge of confidence swept through him. They couldn't back down now, they couldn't retreat from the unknown. We're ready, Zarek declared, trying to hide the fear that was beginning to rise in his chest. We want to know the truth no matter what comes next. The Guardian didn't respond right away, but something in his demeanor suggested he already knew what their decision would be. He raised his hand and, with a gentle gesture, the relics around them began to pulse with a bright light, each detail revealing itself as if they wanted to be seen, touched, and understood. Suddenly, the temple's walls began to crumble, disintegrating into luminous dust, and the entire city seemed to dissolve into the air, as if it were made of some ethereal material. You're about to become something different, the Guardian said, his voice softer now. But remember, every power comes with a price and immeasurable responsibility. If you choose to take what's in front of you, remember that the balance might never be restored. Zarek felt the weight of that final warning. The story of the Guardian, the city, the artifact, everything now seemed to have a deeper, darker purpose. What would be revealed wasn't just a secret, but something that could change not just their fate but everyone's. Zarek felt the tension in his body rising, like the very essence of the city was vibrating with the weight of the decision about to be made. But then, in a moment that felt eternal, a bright light started to shine from the central pedestal, where the artifact was finally revealed in all its glory. The key to fate was there, and Zarek knew that no matter what happened, the decisive moment had arrived. They had come so far, faced so many challenges and secrets. Now the sacrifice was inevitable. There was no turning back. The Guardian watched them with a look that seemed to reflect all the ages of wisdom and pain he'd experienced. Now make your decision. What you choose may define everyone's future, and maybe the end of the very fate you're seeking. The light around them seemed to intensify, filling the space with an energy so pure and yet so frightening that Zarek almost felt like his body couldn't handle it. It was as if the city, the story, the whole time was compressing, and the moment when everything would be revealed was finally upon them. Zarek looked at his friends and then at the light of the artifact. There was no more time to hesitate. The Guardian had given them the final choice. The sacrifice would be great, but by doing what was necessary they could achieve what they had been searching for. The future was in their hands, but the price to be paid was something only time could reveal. The last step of the journey was about to be taken, and the real battle now was against the unknown. The silence hung in the air, thicker than ever, as the light emanating from the artifact started to grow to massive proportions. Zarek could feel his body vibrating with the power of the energy, like the very universe was about to bend around him. The decision about to be made wasn't just about his life, but the fate of all beings in that world. The Guardian, now with his almost ethereal presence, stepped back a pace to allow the trio to move closer, their shadows dancing on the ruined walls. Zarek, Aaron, and Kaler moved forward in unison, as if their souls were connected at that moment. Each of them knew that what would happen next would change everything: their journeys, their relationships, their very destinies. The Guardian had given them a clear warning, but the moment of choice was now. There was no more turning back. They were on the edge of an abyss, and the only way out was to take a step forward into the unknown. Zarek raised his hand, feeling a strange courage welling up inside him. He didn't exactly know what he was doing, but something inside him, an ancient force, was guiding him. He looked at his friends, each one with their own fears and hopes written on their faces, but all with the same fire in their eyes. They had walked this far together, and together they would face whatever was to come. The line between heroes and shadows was now thin, and what they chose could decide the future, not just for them but for all the generations to come. "I think this is it," Zarek said with a firmness that surprised even him. "If we don't do this now, everything we've been through so far will be for nothing. We're ready to face whatever comes next." Aaron, with a determined expression, nodded. "We've made it this far. We're not backing down now." Kaler, always the cautious one, stepped forward, looked at the artifact and then back at the two. He knew deep down that there was no more choice. There was nothing left to lose. "I trust you guys," he said, his voice carrying the weight of an irreversible truth. In a coordinated move, the three of them placed their hands on the artifact at the same time, feeling the energy burning through their skin. A wave of light shot out from the center of the object, enveloping them like a storm of pure energy. The Guardian, watching everything in silence, seemed almost sad, as if he knew the weight of the decision that had just been made. The mist around them faded, revealing a sky now without stars, as if time itself was halting its march. The energy flowing through them was like fire and ice at once, both powerful and painful. The world seemed to tremble under the pressure of that choice, as if everything that existed was aligning, reshaping into a new reality. Zarek felt his mind about to explode from so much information, like the veil between worlds was tearing, and he was about to see the final truth about everything, about the Guardian, the artifacts, about what he really was. And then, as if everything had aligned, the energy suddenly calmed, and the three of them fell to their knees. The Guardian was now standing before them, no longer distant in his divine presence, but as a human, a person. His face carried both gratitude and sorrow. He looked at each of them with a depth that felt like it transcended centuries. "You made the right choice," he said, and the weight of truth in his words hit harder than any victory Zarek had ever known. "The sacrifice you made isn't a loss, but a transformation. The world is balanced once again, and the path ahead, though uncertain, is ready to be walked by those who understand the true power of destiny." Zarek took a deep breath, feeling a kind of peace he'd never known before, even though the price was still to be paid. The Guardian stepped back, fading into the mist one last time, leaving them with the responsibility of carrying what they had just awakened. It was no longer about saving the world. Now it was about rebuilding it. The sky ahead began to clear, and the stars, once gone, slowly started to return, like the universe itself was smiling at them. They'd done what needed to be done, and now the future, with all its mysteries and challenges, was in their hands. But no matter how uncertain it was, one thing was clear. They had chosen the path of truth, and that alone was more powerful than anything the universe could throw at them. The Guardian had spoken about the sacrifice they would face. But now Zarek understood. The greatest sacrifice wasn't losing something physical or material. It was losing ignorance, paying the price of understanding the real meaning behind their own destiny. They had been tested, and they had come out stronger than they ever imagined. The future, much like their journey, was only just beginning. And with that, their story would go on, guided by the light of the knowledge they'd awakened and the courage that made them immortal in their choices. If you like this story, don't forget to drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. See you in the next video.